We cover all of HSI's programmatic areas in Arizona, but our focus really, as a border state, really is on drugs and people unlawfully coming into the state, and money and guns unlawfully moving out of the country.
You recently had the largest fentanyl bust here in the state of Arizona. What does that tell you about the infrastructure and that network that exists just south of the border in Sonora?
Certainly, the cartel infrastructure in Sonora is entrenched. Sinaloa cartel has owned that plaza for about forever. And, the advent of fentanyl coming into the U.S. has been a game changer for law enforcement, and it's a trend that I think is only going to get worse. I think, Mexico has shown more and more ability to produce fentanyl, as more fentanyl does get produced in Mexico versus having to come in from China, or being more dependent on precursor chemicals from China. I think that'll be a game changer because of our proximity to the source of supply.
Why have we continued to see the smugglers try to bring fentanyl through ports of entry when they know the infrastructure, they know the technology, the manpower's there? Simply
put, it's an opportunity to blend with legitimate traffic. If you're coming through a port of entry, you're coming through with the vast majority of people that come through with 100% legitimate reasons for wanting to cross the border, with no ill intent, with no contraband. And again, we're only able to search just by resources a small number of those vehicles. Or a small number of those people if they're pedestrians. If you're coming through the border at a place other than a port of entry, already you're up to no good. And if you're detected, and we're getting better and better every day at detecting people coming between the ports of entry, you're going to get searched no matter what.
HSI has agents embedded along the border to investigate family fraud in CBP's Tucson and Yuma sectors. The agency says between October and March, agents investigated about 700 cases in the Yuma sector alone.
We've had two different types of family fraud. One, which is the far more rare, which is an adult traveling with a child that's not actually part of their family in the times where they have no relationship to. Oftentimes it's an aunt or an uncle claiming to be the parent. There's been a handful of instances where there's no familial relationship whatsoever, and that's scary. There comes a part where on us, there's a culpability to how do we, let a person in with a child where there is no familial relationship, and what's our culpability down the line if something happens to that child. What we're more commonly seeing is young persons, but not necessarily children, oftentimes adults, 22, 23 years old, claiming to be children. Knowing that our ability to detain families is difficult. We don't really have the resources to be able to work this as aggressively as what we'd like to. Biometrics certainly do play a big part of it. We are doing some work with DNA to make sure that we are establishing familial relationships. We've piloted that outside of Arizona, but I think that testing will be coming to Arizona in the very near future.
ICE recently moved additional agents to Arizona. Brown says the agency is working around the clock to ensure it can adequately provide a safe space for migrants to be processed while in DHS facilities.
I don't think anybody likes the perception of, we're keeping people in inadequate facilities. Certainly that's not what we want. What we'd like to do is have the funding that lets us provide humane, safe, and appropriate detention facilities.
What would you do if you could wave a magic wand and just tackle one of these problems?
I think in terms of migration problems, largely it's economically driven. So I think, we need to be working, with our partners at the State Department to figure out how do we get those countries to a stable economic place to cut down on that, draw of coming to the United States. And I think part of that is we also have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to make sure that we're not employing unauthorized workforces in the U.S., which frankly isn't done out of the goodness of people's hearts. That's done out of, I want cheap labor, and it creates an unfair marketplace for U.S. businesses that are trying to do the jobs the right way. Same thing on the drug side. There's a part of that where we as Americans who are consuming these drugs have to take some responsibility for, providing the cartels easy profit.
According to Brown, seizures of hard narcotics like meth and fentanyl are up along the southern border. The San Ysidro port in California leads the nation for narcotic seizures, followed by Nogales and San Luis in Arizona. But something else troubles this agent of more than 25 years, a rise in the exploitation of children and migrants.
Certainly the proliferation of child pornography surprises me and scares me. The number of people willing to engage in exploiting children and view child exploitation material, it's a frightening number. I could keep every agent in HSI in Arizona busy full-time just working child exploitation leads.
Brown also expresses concern for the violence and neglect women and children face when they make the journey to the border, often with the aid of human smugglers.
The frightening fact is, if you're a female coming into the country unlawfully, there's a very, very good possibility you're going to get raped and potentially raped multiple times along that journey. If you're a child, you're probably not going to eat or not going to drink enough to be safe during that journey. The dangers of coming into this country illegally are multitude.
Do you foresee an end in sight?
I think we're going in a lot of ways in the right directions. I think we are getting some additional resources. Again, we are going to expand our DNA testing to make sure that families that are claiming to be families really are families. Hopefully, Congress and the administration can sit down and come up with some good long-term solutions to our current immigration situation, because as it is now, it's not working and it has been working for quite some time.
From the outside looking in, it appears there's been a spike in violent activity just south of the border. Does that put you and your agents on high alert for the possibility of seeing something on this side associated with the crime?
Certainly spillover violence is what we would call that. Certainly that's something we're always vigilant for, particularly when you get heightened acts of violence on the south side. Fortunately, that's very, very rare. But certainly when there's a spike, as the recent spike in Agua Prieta and Naco have been, we do start making sure that we're out there gathering intelligence. We're providing that intelligence where it can help our counterparts with the government of Mexico, where it can help us better align resources, that we're making sure we're communicating potential threats, to the ports of entry, to our partners in Border Patrol and in the sheriff's offices.